For more, let's go to San Francisco. Kristina Dahl is senior climate scientist and the author of Killer Heat in the United States, Climate Choices and the Future of Dangerously Hot Days. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thanks so much for having me.
There's all these jokes about San Francisco being cold in the summer. How is it where you are, by the way?
You know, I had to laugh preparing for this interview today because it is typical San Francisco weather here. It's about 60 degrees, gray and drizzly.
Okay.
So not hot here at all.
Same over here. You know, we saw in that report how this high pressure system seems stuck. Why is that?
So there are a lot of theories about what's going on with weather patterns like this that seem to get stuck, and it's a really active area of scientific research. But what scientists have observed is that the jet stream, which is the current of air that runs west to east across the US and brings us most of our weather, has begun to become wavier. Essentially, it normally would have sort of wiggles within it, and those wiggles have become much more pronounced in recent years. And when that happens, we tend to get weather patterns that get stuck inside those waves and cause these extended heat waves or extended periods of rainfall for different places. So it remains to be seen whether that's something that will continue to happen with climate change, how connected it is to current climate change trends, but it's definitely an active area of research.
What's your gut feeling on this?
You know, my sense from the research is that this pattern of the jet stream becoming wavier and weather patterns getting stuck is connected to the warming climate that we're all experiencing across the globe. But there are, we'll have to see how the scientific studies shake out in the next 5-10 years.
Over the next 5-10 years. And it's incredible. I mean, when you look at those images from places like Seattle and Vancouver, but it's also further north, all the way to the Arctic Circle. So when the Arctic Circle warms up, what are the consequences of that?
So I like to think of it as what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. Really, the Arctic climate affects the whole planet's climate for a number of different reasons. So the Arctic is home to some of the highest latitude forests on the planet. And if we have extreme heat that exacerbates wildfires within the Arctic Circle, then those forests, which store a lot of carbon, burn and release that carbon to the atmosphere, which causes further warming. A similar thing happens if you melt permafrost, and permafrost is essentially soil that's frozen year-round, and it stores a lot of methane, which is a very powerful heat-trapping gas. So if we melt that permafrost, the methane gets released, and again, it exacerbates or worsens the warming we're already experiencing. So it's really important to be paying close attention to what's happening in the Arctic, because all of us around the planet will feel the effects of it.
So if this is just a snap and afterwards we go back to cooler weather, will it all be forgotten, or will this leave a permanent mark?
Well, I think we have to, as a species, as a society, start to really see how each of these incidents might be isolated in time, but they're happening with greater occurrence and with greater severity. And that adds up over time. You know, we have to start recognizing that this is not going to be the last heat wave the Pacific Northwest feels. This is not going to be the last time the Arctic Circle is well above freezing or 20, 30 degrees above normal. This is all part of a larger pattern. And if we don't get our heat trapping emissions in check, if we don't wean ourselves off of fossil fuel use, these sorts of changes are just going to get worse and worse.
The National Weather Service in the United States warning of a possibility of dry lightning strikes this Wednesday. That creates the potential for fires, what you were talking about a moment ago. And when I hear you talk about it getting worse and worse, are you, Kristina Dahl, of the camp that says we can still stop this? Or are you of the camp that says, look, let's just focus the policy on living with it? In other words, trying to prevent those forest fires.
If this were a conversation we were having 20 years ago, we could talk about just stopping fossil fuel use, and we wouldn't have to be dealing with the host of changes that we're already experiencing today. We could really focus on what we in the climate science world call mitigation, or trying to limit the future harms of warming by reducing our emissions. But at this point, we have to be both trying to reduce our emissions and trying to learn how to cope with the changes that we're already seeing today and the ones that we know will come down the pike. Because we're so far past the point of being able to just stop emissions and not see any effects of warming, that we really have to be thinking about those adaptation strategies as well. Now, that said, there's still a lot that we can do. We have a lot of the technologies that we need, things like solar power, wind energy, electric vehicles, charging infrastructure for those vehicles. If we ramp all of that up very quickly, there's a chance that we could limit future warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that would have major benefits for the Arctic and, as we've been talking about, for the rest of the world as well. But it's going to really require all nations around the globe to be focusing their energy and their investments into transitioning us to a very clean energy future.
Kristina Dahl, your book is called Killer Heat in the United States, Climate Choices and the Future of Dangerously Hot Days. Thank you so much for speaking with us from San Francisco.
Thanks so much for having me.